I want to talk to you about my whiskey journey and what got me to a point where I wanted to start a bourbon-related YouTube channel. I've been drinking whiskey for a little over 20 years. And way back in college, the way that started was almost embarrassing. But like, I used to love Jim Beam Choice, which is the old Jim Beam Green Label. And I kind of wish that I had a bottle of it. But usually it was used as a mixer. I didn't really drink a lot of whiskey straight in college, except for Scotch. Now, one of my favorite things back then, and I used to hang out with my good friend, Jesse, which if he ever watches this may be a fond memory for him, but we loved doing whiskey sours while playing Dynasty Warriors on Xbox. And we would use like whatever probably the cheapest whiskey we get. For a long time, it was strictly like your cheap bottom-of-the-barrel Bushmills. I do remember a time when our local liquor store, we used to have state-controlled liquor in Washington State. We no longer do, and I sometimes remember that very fondly. But there was this massive sale on Elijah Craig, right? And so you can think about that. This is back in the very early thousands, so this is pre-fire Heaven Hill. I had no clue what I was drinking back then, but I remember that the whiskey sours we made with that Elijah Craig was way better, and we started kind of shifting toward that and away from the Bushmills. That group of friends, we all kind of started getting busy, getting to work, and eventually I landed in my current career, which is I work as a quality assurance engineer for software, so I break stuff for a living. And I got more and more into Scotch, and what I found is, through some tastings and doing things with friends who also drank Scotch, I do not like peated Scotch. I really, really don't like peated Scotch. And what I really gravitated toward and what became kind of my preferential thing was Macallan. So a Highland Scotch, but I like Highland and Speyside, the more fruitier, non-peated Scotches. I was a very strict, like, Macallan 12 or 15 were my preferences on the rocks. So you can think about that as a bourbon drinker. You're like, that sounds really weak. But those are the things that I liked for quite a while. And I still would buy bourbon regularly, usually at Costco. I like calling that like the Costco drinker. But I would make, instead of rum and cokes, I loved bourbon and cokes. I still like rum too, but my go-to was usually bourbon and coke when I was mixing. So it would very frequently be one of two things. And this is really where my true bourbon side of the journey begins. I'm actually out of this currently, but I like keeping a bottle almost all times. Four Roses Small Batch Select. A really good friend of mine who we'll talk about in just a second, we'll call him Mr. C. He spent a lot of time in Kentucky, went to the University of Louisville, and I remember at one point he knew I was a Scotch drinker, and he kind of like was trying to get me more into bourbon specifically, and he said, try Four Roses. And found Four Roses Small Batch Select at my local Costco, and man, I loved it. But I was using this as a mixer. Keep that in mind. I've always been a person who liked a little bit higher end. I didn't always go like the cheapest thing when it came to my mixers, even though now my favorite is probably like Early Times Bottle and Bond as a mixer. It's so good. But this and Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. This is another one where I've recently run out, but I like having it around. This is actually one of my favorite things to make bourbon and coke with. And I know a lot of you strict bourbon drinkers are going to be like, but it has such good flavor that it punches through, and you can really taste the bourbon as long as you're not mixing 2 drops of bourbon into a full can of coke or something. I drink most of my bourbon straight nowadays, but every once in a while I feel like having one. This is one of my go-tos, or it's the Four Roses, or nowadays, if I don't have either of these two, or I just want to use my cheaper mixer, it's Early Times Bottle and Bond. Mr. C I met through work, and we worked together for like 4 years, and we became phenomenal friends because of another mutual hobby, and we still talk regularly to this day. But he ended up moving to Kentucky, and I was really sad because I was losing this really good friend of mine, and I wasn't fully into bourbon yet, but I met my wife, and I'll put up this picture because I had just finished like 4 years working at a particular role at Microsoft. I've worked at Microsoft multiple times throughout my career as a software breaker of things. And I decided to celebrate with a nice bottle of Macallan 18. I typically only usually bought 12s and get myself like 115 a year as my kind of nice pour for the week. That was when I wanted to do something a little more celebratory. I'd have a glass or two on the rocks of 15, but I wanted to get an 18. I wanted that nicer high-end bottle. And my first in-person date with my wife, and one of the ways I got her to meet me in person, because she's very, very shy, is I said, hey, the first time, if you're feeling comfortable after our first date, you can come back to my place and we'll each have a glass of this, because I found out that she was into whiskey and specifically Scotch. So we go to our first date and we're hanging out. We're just watching anime, honestly, on my couch. And I go through, I pour her a glass. She loved it. She asked for another. And another. And another. And I eventually stopped her because I was really worried about her getting too drunk. And I mean, this was over several hours, but still I didn't want her to get drunk. I'm kind of a gentleman in that way, but I was just like, hey, you should probably drink more water and not have any more whiskey for the night. And she was worried that she'd done something wrong. And I was like, no, I don't want you getting drunk. You've had quite a bit. And it was then where I kind of revealed that she'd had about a third of the bottle. It's not really a third specifically for her. I had some too, but it was kind of, we'd gone through a third of the bottle of whiskey, and she was so embarrassed, and to this day she's still kind of a little embarrassed about it. But part of how I met my wife is whiskey. Started dating, and eventually I had an opportunity where my other hobby, which you can tell by my background, this will eventually change, but I have a empty fish tank sitting behind me. I do aquarium fish, for those who don't know me through my other YouTube channel. But I had an aquarium convention that was going to happen in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I reached out to my buddy, Mr. C, and I was like, hey, dude, I'm going to this convention. I've been really wanting to come spend time with you. So how much extra time should it take? And the convention was mostly on the weekend. So I spent an entire week in Kentucky, and we spent 3 days hitting distilleries, and me getting to really experience the Bourbon Trail. And man, so there, I'll have a bunch of pictures come up through this, but like, we toured Willet, and Willet, like, I know a lot of people do not like Willet pot still. I actually like some of the Willet products. My favorite Willet that I've had so far, not including Purple Tops, I don't feel that's very fair, but my favorite Willet shelfer is the Old Bardstown Bottle and Bond, which is Kentucky only, and you can't get it in Washington State. But I do like the Noah's Mill. I actually quite like that a lot. I usually always have a bottle of that. But Willet was super fun to tour because Willet is so small compared to, say, like Heaven Hill or Buffalo Trace or Four Roses, Wild Turkey, any of the really big houses, that when you walk through there, everything has a specific purpose. It's not like, here is the 457th stainless steel vat you've seen today. It's more like, oh yeah, so that vat right there, that's still like, looks different than all the others, that one only does this one thing. And here's our one pot still that we make all of our stuff from. And it was just a super cool experience. Their tour is phenomenal. The tour guide that we had, she was wonderful. I think her name was Sandy, if I remember correctly. Absolutely wonderful tour guide. Lots of fun. But what made that tour really cool is that as you got through parts of the tour, they would stop and you would do a little tasting. You'd have several different products. You'd pick the one you want to try, and then you move on. You do another stop and have a little tasting and move on and try. So instead of kind of all the stuff at the end, which is more common in a lot of tours, you had like checkpoints where you were sampling some of the Willet product, and you got a number of things to choose from each time. And I really liked that experience. It was super fun. It was the one main, like, full-fledged tour that I did while I was there, because we only had so much time and we wanted to hit a ton of places. But that was the one that I loved the most. Followed shortly by this, let's be honest. You can see by this towel here, but more importantly, I got really exposed to Michter's when I was in Kentucky. My friend Mr. C and I went to the Michter's bar, and at that time the Fill Your Own was not available. I'm really sad about that because I would have loved a Fort Nelson. But the bar was still doing COVID protocols, so they would only allow so many parties in at a time. I think it was like 6. It was very limited, which was really awesome. But I tried a number of different Michter's. the Shelfers I've been buying regularly. This is actually like my most common warm-up pour for myself. If I ever have a warm-up pour, it is almost always this or Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit. Those are the two, because I know them so well that it kind of like lets my palate get ready for other whiskey, and when I'm trying to do tasting notes and things like that, I'm really enjoying stuff. Man, I tried so many things when I was at Michter's. A couple of cocktails, a bunch of the Michter's Toasted. I really loved the Michter's Toasted bourbon, and it's almost impossible to get in Washington State. Luckily, recently I got one, but that's neither here nor there. But this has become one of my favorite brands, and kind of behind me you'll see like an array of different bottles. These are like most of my favorites over the last about 2.5 years or so that I've come across and I've had the opportunity to try. Some of them I've gotten through friends that are in Kentucky, like some of the Old Forester 117 series. I do this, but like Michter's 10 and Baumburgers over here on the far end. They're some of my favorites. Obviously some Buffalo Trace stuff, but there's also some smaller stuff. So some Washington and like Colorado and Michigan. So I've got Dragon's Milk. I've really fallen in love with Dragon's Milk's profile. Copperworks is kind of similar. They're a single malt out of the Seattle area. They have this like super apricot forward flavor profile that I love. I love. And then the other one would be Fireside out of Colorado. They do a lot of single barrel hazmats. They do not drink that hot. They drink like they're in the 120s. They have great flavor despite being a little younger. They're just a really awesome craft distillery. And it's one of the things that I fall in love with, certain craft distillery stuff versus some of the big boys, right? It's just really interesting. And there's an array of like opens, sealed, and completely empty bottles up here. I just wanted to represent them as I talk about this journey. So Kentucky like lit a fire under me, right? Going to Old Forester, going to Michter's, going to actual Jim Beam. I didn't really take many pictures because they were closed, so we just kind of drove around the campus a little bit and left on the day we went there. I'm like, well, I got Tuesday or something. But Willet was a great experience, and there was stuff I didn't get to go to just because we only had so much time, and a lot of it was we wanted to spend time just hanging out and not purely doing whiskey stuff because we have another hobby, and he has an amazing rec room at his home, which is he has his own pinball room. He's a big pinball nerd, and I used to love going to arcades and playing pinball. So it's really fun to hang out with Mr. C whenever I can. We love just talking about video games, and usually we're sipping some whiskey when we do. Anyway, since that trip, that kind of catapulted me like way deeper in the bourbon world. I just fell in love with bourbon while in Kentucky. I mean, who wouldn't, right? If you like whiskey and you go to Kentucky, I think you're going to find yourself really gravitating toward bourbon fast. And now, I love it so much I want to talk about it. So here's where this is going to get interesting. I've gone through my bourbon journey, and especially in the last like 2 years, I've kind of fallen into getting allocated products and like waiting in line at special releases at like my local distillery, namely Woodinville Whiskey Company. I love a lot of the crazy special releases they do. Trying to get my hands on other special releases from other small craft distilleries like Dragon's Milk, which is right here. They make some amazing products. So if you're in Michigan, and we need to talk. But some of the other special releases I've come to really love over the period of time, I've really gotten into enjoying a lot of things. The one thing I'm not big on is rye, and yet I keep trying ryes. So one of the few ryes that I really do like is a lot of the Michter's ryes in general. It's one of the reasons why I love Michter's is both their bourbon and their rye are something that I enjoy drinking. But I have this kind of rule. Despite the fact that I know, like, I haven't really liked a lot of ryes, I will always try new stuff. And I think that's a great thing for those of you who are watching, whether you know me through fish or maybe you're coming to know me through whiskey. My advice and encouragement to you is always be willing to try something new. Even if it has something that you, in the past, have known, like, I'm not a big fan of it. Try a small sample pour. If you got a friend who has a bottle, maybe you're at that distillery and they're offering samples, don't just say no to something because you've tried some other product and you just like, I didn't like chocolate malted ryes or anything like that. So anything that's got like Detling would be an example there, right? Anything that's got like a chocolate malt as a part of their mash bill, try it. Try something else because you never know. I'll give you an example. There's a small distillery here in Washington. They're in Auburn, which is not terribly far from where I live, called Blackfish. And they're kind of small. They make a lot of really cool stuff, like flavored liqueurs that are based off of their new make whiskey and things like that. But they have chocolate malted rye in the bourbon that they make. And it's not as prevalent as, say, something like the Detling or some of the other ones that use a bit more of that chocolate malted rye. And it doesn't give the aftertaste that, for me, I don't find as enjoyable in those other products. But I like some of what they make. So never be afraid to try something. Always be willing to try, especially if you can get a sample or something like that. Now, don't go, spending like $100 on a bottle that you're not sure you're going to like. Don't do that, right? Be smart with your money. But if you have an opportunity to try something at a bar, through friends, maybe you've joined an online group that will do sample sharing and stuff like that, try stuff. Always try stuff, because you never know. You might think like, man, I'm a diehard Wild Turkey person, but then you might get a sample from this like weird distillery in Seattle, Washington that makes American single malts, like Copperworks, and you might be like, I don't know, it's only a few years, it's not very old, and then you find out it has this amazing apricot forward fruity profile, and you might fall in love with it. There's a number of other phenomenal distilleries out there, small ones. I can think of like Cedar Ridge as an example, is one, a friend of mine who goes back to Iowa to see family. He brings back different stuff, and he always pours me samples, and everything that I've had from them so far has been delicious. So you never know what like random thing you're going to fall in love with. Don't be afraid to try things. And I think the more that you're willing to try, don't get reckless with your spending. That's my biggest advice to you. Some of us get a little too crazy sometimes, but try stuff, because you never know what's going to take you from one part of your whiskey journey to the next part of your whiskey journey. And you could be like some of my friends who started out as like diehard taters, and now they're like the craft distillery guy, or they're the person who's like, I used to never drink XYZ, and now they're the rye guy, or the person who's like, I'm in this club and I only do club picks, or I only like barrel picks from local stores, whatever that may be. You never know what you're going to find that will really open up your world and let you have a fantastic experience and share memories with a number of friends. That is, to date, my bourbon journey, my whiskey journey, and I thank you for coming along with me. What I will say is, I'm going to start doing some more videos. They might be a little infrequent. I've got some goals. In the comments down below, let me know, what are you interested in seeing the most? Would you rather see a review? I've got a couple of different relatively new things that I would like to do, kind of tasting notes and reviews on. Or would you rather have something a bit more like blinds? So, we all know that what a blind is, but would you rather see a blind comparing something, or like a straightforward where we're talking about tasting notes and what I find interesting about it, especially if it's something that maybe I have collected multiple of, in the sense of like, say, I was E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. I'm a big fan of E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. I have many, many batches, and I like comparing them across each other. The new batch 13 has recently come out. That would be an example. Or there's a lot of other things where I have lots of stuff I can compare. Let me know. I'd like to hear in the comments down below. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a like. Consider sharing. If the first video, I know this is going to sound insane, but if this can get to 1,000 views in its first month, I will do a pretty epic giveaway to the people in the comments. So that's my challenge. I would love to see other creators do the same thing. So some of my friends that I've gotten the opportunity to meet, Simone Barkeep, Baker Drinks, Matt from Whiskey Wisdom, maybe, if we can bully him into doing something. Anyone else, Pacific Northwest Bourbon, Mark, would love to see, like, if you haven't already done so, what was your whiskey journey? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.